The government has now decided to apparently go ahead and try to broaden this bill as it applies to schools even more than it already is. Even though, and this is the part that's a little bizarre, to me anyway, we'll try to find out more, even though its own auditors from the education department, right, because they were sent in to see what's going on, how serious is the problem, they found no breach of Bill 21 for the majority of complaints and reports that they analyzed. No major breach, nothing. So what does the government do? They're going to go ahead and introduce, it's not done yet, but at least from what I understand, unless it's being done today, going to go ahead and extend its ban on religious symbols following this report, which, as I said, found no major problems here. Look, beyond teachers here, the difference now is when I say broaden, it would include people who ordinarily you'd think, what do they have to do with this? But let me find out from someone who knows more. Kim Watson is Vice President of Quebec's Professional Association of Administrative Staff, and she is on the line. Hi, Kim.
Good afternoon.
You know, I'm having trouble trying to understand this because the people here, when we talk about administrative staff, I understood the issue with teachers. We all, heard what had happened. What does this mean specifically? Do you know?
Yeah, it is quite bewildering. When they want to expand it, they're specifically speaking of daycare educators, daycare technicians, teacher support in the classrooms. Predominantly in the French, our union represents both the CSSDM and the EMSB, white-collar workers. And in the French system, and I imagine when they visited Montreal schools, they noticed that there are a lot of support staff who work in the daycares who are wearing religious symbols because they are not touched by Bill 21.
Right.
And I suspect that it must have ruffled their feathers because they must have seen this as some kind of threat, even though, as you said, the report did not show that there was any problem. The problems that did exist were much deeper. And if they do decide to extend it to support staff, to daycare educators, daycare workers, it is going to further aggravate what is already a pretty bleak situation in terms of attracting and retaining employees.
All right, well, so let me go back to what you just said a minute ago, and I want to try to understand it. You said when there are much deeper problems. What problems are you referring to?
Well, there may have been cultural issues. There might have been bullying, intimidation. None of our schools in the English Montreal School Board have experienced any of this, but it had nothing to do with the religious symbols. In fact, The perpetrators, from what we know of the study of these situations, the perpetrators were not even people who had been touched by this ban. They were people who would not have been wearing religious symbols or denied from wearing religious symbols. So it was a situation that was, it had gone on for a while. It had been allowed to fester, let's say.
Okay.
And then finally, when an investigation had to be brought in, the government had to get involved. But to say that it was related to the religious symbols is just not true.
Okay, so now I'm this is a mystery here. You're referring to something I was not aware of. I don't know if this is something that was, the public was aware of. Was something going on, forget about religious symbols now, in these schools that needed to be investigated? Was the government made aware of this? What are we talking about?
I can't really speak to that because it wasn't in, my dossier is the English Montreal School Board, and nothing like that happens in our school board as far as I know.
Okay.
It would have happened in the French system, but the little I do know is that it did not have to do with religious symbols.
All right.
It was a deeper problem that, probably had to have been investigated some time ago, as can happen in workplaces.
Let me ask this question, though, with respect to staff. Now, are we talking about, and we know that the government, of course, had trouble finding enough people, enough teachers, and they were asking anybody just, be a body in a classroom. Is that who we're talking about here?
No, we're specifically speaking about support staff. Teachers, just like teachers, support staff have to be hired, and they have to have certain qualifications to be able to do their jobs, whether it's daycare educator, classroom helper, so soutien à la classe, and it could be any other support staff, secretaries, whatever, but they seem to be leaning mostly towards daycare educators at this point.
Okay.
They have to be qualified, and they have to be competent at their jobs. They have to do their jobs well, and, they're taking care of our children. So the government feels that even though they're among the lowest paid in the school system and we cannot attract them and we have a shortage of employees, the government seems to want to target them because they spend time with our children while parents are at work at the end of the school day.
So they're not even
and during the day
necessarily
helping.
they're not even necessarily the ones educating the kids, but they happen to be with them or around them, and the government feels that's a threat.
Exactly. Daycare educators, they do a lot. I mean, they work very hard. They love our children, and they do a wonderful job. But they accompany teachers in the classroom. They help with the homework after school. There is an education component in some of the activities, but it's not to the same extent as a school teacher would be doing.
Okay.
And they take them outside, they get them fresh air, they play games with them, and they keep them safe until parents come to pick them up at the end of the day.
Okay. Beyond that, I mean, I teased the interview we were going to do by saying, you know what, if you're a janitor, superintendent in a school, you could be targeted here as well.
Well, if they want to expand it to support staff, in theory, they could expand it to everyone, which is, you know, a little ludicrous because they do have a shortage. There is a current shortage, and if now whether or not someone is wearing a religious symbol trumps whether or not they're qualified to do a job, we may find ourselves in a rupture of service because if there are no people to do the jobs, how can we keep the system going?
Well, you mentioned a minute ago that it's already difficult now to attract these people. Is that because the pay is so bad? Why is it difficult to attract staff or people here?
They are the lowest paid, or among the lowest paid in our school system, and you know, it's as you probably have heard during our last round of negotiations, which are now concluded. When you compare it to a lot of the private sector, many of these educators can go work in a daycare and get paid more. So we have competition. You know, they can go and work in other jobs and get paid more. They love their jobs. They stay in the jobs because they are dedicated. But it is hard to attract new personnel because the pay is not particularly competitive. And even once they're there, if they start to feel as though they can't make ends meet because, you know, our insurance costs a lot. As anyone else who has a job, they have to pay their taxes, they have insurance. But when you take the deductions off, they find they might be having trouble making ends meet at the end of the month. So then they start looking elsewhere. And if they find something that pays more, it's hard to retain them. It's hard to keep them in the jobs.
Okay. By the way,
now if we Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, I should point out, students are allowed to wear religious symbols in school, right? It's teachers and the support staff you're referring to that are not. But
it's correct. Right now it's only teachers.
Right.
Yeah.
But you get the sense that the government is probably looking at this as well. At least that's the impression I get from what I read, that the government would like to see nobody, including students, be able to do this in class.
Yes, they're flying it up the flagpole, which, I mean, it would be very unfortunate. I mean, as you probably are aware, the English system already has been trying to fight this in courts because, you know, we're very fortunate. We live in Montreal, which is a very multicultural city, and we're fortunate to have access to so many different cultures and to be able to work together and live together and learn from each other and open our minds. And this kind of a law, especially if it's extended and children aren't allowed and support staff aren't allowed and they expend it as much as they wish to, all it will do is create more rift between different communities. Yeah. I can't see how it would actually help our community.
Kind of wondering if this is another one of those situations where a government is trying to, you know, fix something that's not broken. I don't know if have you had a situation, just as a final question, where parents have come to you and say, you should see what's going on. My kids are affected. They're complaining. Has anyone said that to you?
Nothing that has come across my desk.
No. So there you go. Let's fix something.
Our workers are hard workers, and they do a great job.
Let's fix something that's not broken yet again. I thank you so much, Kim. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Have
a good
care.
Day.
Kim Watson, Vice President of Quebec's Professional Association of Administrative Staff. By the way, this is just something they're going to table. It's not yet passed. It's not yet legislation, but it is what the government is looking at. I guess anything to keep us from looking at what happened at SACLIC.